Today is November 21, 2008. My name is Jerry Gill. I'm interviewing Richard W. Poole, Dick Poole, in his residence. This is part of the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And Dick, you've had a long and distinguished career at Oklahoma State University. But could you go back and tell us a little bit about where you grew up, a little about your family life?
Well, I sure will, but Jerry, it's great to have you visiting the old folks down in the home in the retirement center here. I joke about that. We are down in Epworth Villa for independent living now, but it's really a great place, and it's good to have you here today. I was born in Oklahoma City, grew up here, went to Wilson Grade School and Harding Junior High School and the old Classen High, threw papers while I was in school, and then I was afraid that I couldn't go to college because I didn't have any resources. My folks were still recovering from the Great Depression, which is characteristic of a lot of people my age. And so I went down to enlist in the Army in 1946.
Well, Dick, where did you go to high school?
Old Classen High.
Old Classen High School?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything stand out in your mind about your years there in the class?
Yeah, most of it I was working throwing papers. I got 2 paper routes so I could save enough money. As long as I had to get up at 3 in the morning, why not do 2?
Mm-hmm. So then you joined the Army in 46?
Yeah, but then I quit my paper route, and the first time I took high school seriously was my senior year. I was not a very good student in the first part of high school. I was saving money to buy a car, and I did finally get one, a 1933 Chevrolet.
Hard to imagine.
And then I went into the service, and I got to tell you this story, though, Jerry. I was afraid I'd flunk the physical because the only way I thought I could go to college was on the GI Bill. I was so ignorant. Now, that's different than stupid. I was so ignorant I didn't know you could work your way through college. So I wanted that GI Bill badly. And I did go into the service in January 1946, right after the war was over.
Can you tell us a little about your career in the Army? I mean, how long have you been in the
Well, yes. I went in, as I said, in January, and I was sent to Camp Robinson, Arkansas. Went through infantry basic training. They called me in at the end of that and said, we gave you some little test there. You're not very bright, but you scored high enough that you could qualify for officers candidate school. And I said, what? And I said, yep. And so anyways, I went before a board and I got picked to go to officers candidate school. I think they were terribly short of officers at that time. It was the end of the war. They were going to the bottom of the barrel. And of all the things I thought I'd go to infantry, basic officers school, they sent me to Fort Sill. I didn't know one end of a cannon from the other. But I went to Fort Sill, and we started with a class of 66 people. 19 of us graduated. And I got commissioned as second lieutenant in the field artillery at the age of 18. And sometime I'll tell you if you're ever interested in a very interesting story about my career in the Army. Then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and served for a short period of time. And then I went overseas and served with the 1st Cavalry Division in Japan, 82nd Field Artillery Battalion, and I ended up there as the S2, the intelligence officer for our battalion. And then I came back home and went back to school. But that was my Army career. But I did stay in the reserve, and I did finally retire from the Army Reserve. I enjoyed my affiliation there.
You retired as Lieutenant Colonel?
Yes,
Well, now go ahead and tell me your story. You said
when I was in basic training, I'd finished up, and I got KP duty one day. And while I was in there, I was doing a pretty good job, I thought, mopping and all, and the mess sergeant came in, and he was a little intoxicated, and he had a date with him, and he was showing off, and he got all over my back, and he says, you're not doing a job, you start remopping that floor, and so forth. And he was pretty abusive, and I just rolled with it and did it. Soon as he left, his assistant there came up and said, he's just drunk, don't worry about him at all, Dick. He says, you've done a great job, go home. Well, I didn't think any more about that. Guess what? Sometime later, I said earlier, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The CO of that battery I was assigned to was going on leave. He says, you're going to be the battery commander. Now, I want to take you down to the mess hall. Now, I was in Camp Robinson, Arkansas. We went down to that mess hall, and guess who was the mess sergeant? The same man that had given me that trouble. And I used to tell this story to my students. You know what? I never said a word to him about it. I didn't come back to try and abuse power or put anything on him. But I'll tell you one thing, Jerry. I watched that guy like a hawk. But when I came in, oh, yes, sir, he'd salute me. Yes, sir, Lieutenant, good to have you here. He didn't remember me. He couldn't have remembered me. But I never abused my power over that guy. But you talk of the odds of that happening. You just can't believe that. Anyways, that's a story that is phenomenal from my standpoint.
Did you ever get a promotion while you were CO?
Well, I was only there a month
okay.
because I was later then joined the 1st Cavalry Division. But on a promotion, I came back and they said, you're too young now to be an officer. See, I'd gotten commissioned at 18 and pretty soon they said you had to be 21 to be an officer. But I learned a lot.
Well, so then when you got out of you finished your Army career, can you tell me about where you went from there?
Yep. I hate to tell you this, Jerry, but I went down to OU and I commuted my first year to OU. And then I moved down and stayed with a dear friend. And then I finished up my degrees. I got 2 degrees in 4 years at OU. I got a bachelor's in business and a master's degree. And the thing that I don't know what happened again, something happened. I was called up at an assembly at the end of my undergraduate work, and they said, and the person that has the highest academic standing in the College of Business, that's a male, at that time we had males and females, is a guy named Richard Poole, and I dropped my jaw. So I went up and got the award for the highest academic standing. And anyways, later on, I told that story, and Raymond Young would say, yeah, he went to OU, but he had to come up to OSU to get educated.
Raymond would say that.
That's right.
So
he was the Y in TG&Y, a great supporter of OSU and a great entrepreneur.
And a great human being.
Yes, sir. First class.
So you finished when you got your bachelor's, then you went and got your MBA there then?
Yes, got them in 4 years.
4 years. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So.
And then I went to work for the Oklahoma Gas and Electric Company.
Okay.
And I had worked in the Bureau of Business Research down there, and I did a project for them called "A Key to the Industrial Potential of Oklahoma," which was talking about the potential for Oklahoma for accommodating industry. And they offered me a job, and I got that year the highest offer out of the college. Guess what? It was about $350 a month, and that sounds awful. That was the top award at that time. Well, I wanted to stay in Oklahoma. I wanted to have experience in business, and so I joined OG&E.
So can you kind of share with me your career before you?
Yeah, well, then with OG&E, I worked there, and I wanted experience there. I knew someday I wanted to teach, but I wanted if I was going to teach, I wanted experience in business. I'd had great experience in the military. I wanted experience in business. So after I was there for a while, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce wanted me to come over and join them. And I went over and worked with Paul Strasbaugh and Stanley Draper. And I'm going to tell you, Stanley Draper taught me more than I ever learned in my PhD studies about how you get things done. A great guy, and the same with Paul Strasbaugh. In fact, I'm going to have lunch with Paul in a few days here. We've maintained a close relationship, and we worked on industrial development together. And then while I was working there, the business leaders in Oklahoma City created what they called the Frontiers of Science Foundation. And that was Mr. E.K. Gaylord, Dean McGee, and a guy by the name of Jim Webb and so forth. And they got him to be the president of the group. And they called up and said, we want a young buck to shuffle papers over there. So I went over as assistant to the president of the Frontiers of Science Foundation, got to know Mr. Webb. And he had served as in industry before. He'd been Undersecretary of State. Senator Kerr identified him director of the Bureau of the Budget, and they brought him to Oklahoma to head this up. Well, he became my mentor, and I owe so much to Jim Webb for all that he did for me. And I worked for him for a year, and then he said, you want to get your PhD? And I said, I sure do, but I've got 3 children. He said, I want you to look after my office building in Washington, D.C., and you can go to George Washington University. So I took the family, we moved up there. We also got a bit of a grant from John Kirkpatrick, Admiral Kirkpatrick, who did the big center in Oklahoma City, another great pioneer and builder. And while I was up there, I got an offer to come back to OSU. While I was there, by the way, I took a course under the head of research for the Federal Reserve, and I really enjoyed that and learned a lot. And he offered me a job to go to work for the Fed, but I didn't do it. I came back to OSU and came back and got a job as a research assistant and had that support. Then some financial help from Jim Webb and John Kirkpatrick there, and worked at OSU. And I got my doctorate then in economics at OSU. And I was the first person to receive the doctorate in economics at OSU.
The person who received the PhD with you was Dr. Duck Nam, is that right?
He was the second graduate, and Bob Sandmeyer was the third graduate.
Okay.
And Duck Nam and I became very close friends, and I'll just say it right here. He was a very bright guy. We spent a lot of time together in the library. He'd come to our house periodically. He went back home, translated Dick Leftwich's book on price theory, and did a book over there. He later became Minister of Finance, and he is credited, it's in the Wall Street Journal, with the economic recovery and growth of South Korea. And then, after being in that position, he became Prime Minister of Korea and did a great job. Then after he left that, he headed up their trade association, which is a fantastic facility. And we've been his guest back in Korea a number of times. And it's been a wonderful relationship, and we've had him back to the School of International Studies, where he's become a Henry G. Bennett Fellow and the rest. So all these things tie together as the years pass.
Dick, you must take special pride in having received the first, I'm thinking it's both, the first PhD offered by the entire College of Business Administration and the Department of Economics, correct?
Yes, in terms of economics, that's right. And we can talk about this a little bit later, but we did not offer a PhD at that time in any other field, just in economics in the College of Business.
That's what I was thinking. So literally, you had the first PhD offered through the college.
Yes.
In any subject.
Yes.
A lot of pride there. Well, again, what drew you to Oklahoma State? What was the tie there that got you back? Because you sound like you had an offer in D.C., but
well, I had several ties there, and I'm glad you raised that. When I was in the frontiers of science, the top business leaders wanted someone from the academic with credentials to come and kind of be the front guy there with the academics. I was kind of assistant to the president. They brought in a guy by the name of Bob McVicker, who was vice president up at OSU, an outstanding person and extremely bright. And I became very close to Bob McVicker. And he said, you need to come to OSU. And we had a relationship. He was later dean of the graduate college. He was executive vice president under Oliver Wilhelm. And so they made me an offer. Gene Swearingen, who was dean at that time, and Russell Ball headed the department. And Lynn was, I think, ready to come back to Oklahoma since I was spending so much time in the library with the 3 children. So we moved back to Oklahoma and lived out in Vet Village and had a great time out there. It looked like Poverty Row, but none of us knew it. We were also in the same boat, and we were all good people and had a great time out in Vet Village. Well, 15B Mitty. I remember that, my friend.
Well, that takes us down another road. You got to tell me some experience about it. Do people understand what
I did. I guess
we'll save that story for just a minute, okay? But I want to hear that story, okay?
Oh, well, out in Vet Village, or
in Vet Village story.
Well, there were so many of them out there. There was a couple working on their PhDs in mathematics, and Lynn took care of our children, and they had 4 children, and she took care of them, and so we developed a real relationship. But I'll tell you the one thing: this is not good. When we first moved there, they used to pick the trash up in gunny sacks, hanging from the clothesline, and I thought that was pretty abominable. And here we were. Now, we've come a long ways in Stillwater, but when I first saw that, I said, what have I come back to? Well, they later got that fixed up, and this is a terrible story, but my wife was looking out there one day, and a big rat was coming up to it, and the guy next door ran over and stomped on it. That's a terrible story, but they got rid of those after a while. And before they tore those buildings down, we went over and took the mailbox off of 15B Mitty, and I passed that on to my children. 15B Mitty will live in infamy with my children.
Now, I understand in the wintertime, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot between you and the North Pole.
Oh, no. And in fact, I hate to tell you this, when I'd open up the cabinet, I could almost see the light in the next bathroom in the next accommodation. And we never did talk too loud because we'd hear everybody's conversations. But we had a lot of camaraderie, and it was a wonderful experience. We'll never forget it.
Wonderful. That's super. Dick, after we were talking about getting your PhD in economics there, but then you went from, let's see, in 1960 as instructor to assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, and then dean of the College of Business Administration from 1960 to 1965. How do you explain this meteoric rise? I mean, this is phenomenal in 5 years' time.
Jerry, I think just a lot of things fell into place. I've always said I've been lucky to be at the right place at the right time. At that time, of course, I had a little bit maturity because I was older. I'd had experience in the business sector, and I'd had experience with the Chamber of Commerce, where I said I learned so much. I had a lot of contacts in the state, but I wanted to go back to teaching. So I got my instructorship, and then when I got involved in that, shortly after I started teaching in my field was macroeconomics, which I really enjoyed a great deal. Jim Webb got appointed to head up the NASA program, and so I started doing consulting for them. And I ended up getting a very large grant, and I think a lot of things fell into place. I did get promoted rather rapidly because of my experience from assistant to associate. And then the deanship came open, and I had a number of people approach me. And I think probably in some ways it was because I had worked so much in Oklahoma, knew the Oklahoma setting, knew the business community, as well as the governmental community. And that probably made my credentials right for the time. I was the right man, perhaps I hate to put it that way, for that position at that time, not because of great intellect and so forth, but because of my relationship and work with the community. Just like the current president, Burns Hargis, is the right man for OSU right now. He's an outstanding guy. He knows the community, the business community, the professional community, the governmental community. And there are times in any institution's history where you have to have a lot of outreach to help you make progress. And so I think, as I said, it was these relationships that led some people, Oliver Wilhelm, Swearingen, and others, think I was kind of the guy to be out there. By the way, I'd worked for Henry Bellman when he came in, not because of politics or anything like that. I'm basically a Democrat, but Henry called me to head up the technical services program in the state when they got legislation. And I mean, I headed this up as a volunteer effort where I had to involve all the universities across the state of Oklahoma. And I guess I knew how, more or less, or at least better than anyone else on board, to deal with these various facets of our Oklahoma economy. That's about the only reason I can explain it. Although I do think I was a good teacher, and sometime I'll tell you a story about what I consider my greatest compliment whenever you want it.
Well, go ahead, tell the story.
Well, taking this time period, I made this progress. I had research projects going on. I had a large research grant. I had a lot of graduate students working for me. I had undergraduates working for me, and I had several professors involved in this. Larkin Warner was involved in it, Bob Sandmeyer, Ansel Sharp, and others. Well, when I was being asked to serve, I didn't seek the deanship. I was being approached that, would you serve the deanship because you have the connections that would be effective at this time in the college's growth and development. Well, the graduate students sent a representative to see me down in my little research area. There's on the first floor of Morrill Hall. I'll never forget it. Had been a big classroom that we converted, had desks all over the place for this research project. And they said, Dr. Poole, we know that they're asking you to, they're promoting you to be dean of the College of Business, and we want you to do what is best for you. But what we'd like for you to know is that the graduate students hope that you will stay as a full-time professor and work with the graduate students. I've had some nice honors and some nice recognitions, but that's the highest compliment I could ever have because of my love for teaching, to have the graduate students come and say that to me. So that was the little story on that.
Well, speaking of that, can you give me a little bit of background on how you, had the process for bringing in as dean? You said you did not solicit that, but how did that work? What was the process?
Well, at the time, I don't think we went through as much of the review process as you tend to do nowadays. It certainly was not as structured as it as it is today.
The national
And there are a lot of advantages to the structured process because there can be abuses. What happened is that I think the president of the university at the time, Dean Swearingen, the former dean Raymond D. Thomas, thought that I would be a good candidate for the position, as well as my department head and some other faculties. And they said their job was, you apply for this job. I didn't want to apply for it. So finally, when I say I was courted, I finally did. And I have some of those letters somewhere, by the way, where Raymond Thomas had written me, asked me to be sure to apply and wanted to do it. I did apply, and then there was kind of a review committee and a process that went through. And then that was submitted from the college to the president, and then the president took it to the board. And I remember the board called me over before they would approve my appointment. I mean, it was going to be acted on, I gather, that day. And they wanted to hear from this new prospective dean. And they went over a variety and asked me a lot of questions. And I'll never forget, one of the members of the board said, not picking on anybody, but he says, a lot of times, economists are sometimes considered very conservative, or most of the time they're very liberal, it seems to some of us. And where do you stand on this? And my response was, it depends on who I'm talking to. To some people, I'm a conservative. To some people, I'm a liberal. But here are my core beliefs on the market economy and how this works. And they just chuckled on that pretty well. And anyways, the board did approve my appointment. And that was a problem. But it was far less structured than it is today.
Who were some of the regents you recall at that time?
Let's see. Boy, the names slipped my mind. Now, out in western Oklahoma, Lad Hitch was on the board at that time. A gentleman from down around southwest Oklahoma was on the board. I've just, time passes. I'd go back and look those up right away, and I'm sorry I don't remember, but the board was very supportive of me. Yeah. And then I took some actions later on that the board greatly appreciated.
And Oliver S. Wilhelm was president.
Yes, Oliver Wilhelm was president.
You had some conversation with Dr. Wilhelm about the position.
Yeah. And he encouraged me to apply. In other words, I had to go through whatever process they had, but it certainly wasn't as structured as it is today. And as I say, good structure is important because you got to be careful.
Let me sort of backtrack a little bit and ask you about some of your colleagues and some of the faculty that you recall at that time. What you were teaching in your career as dean, but can some of them stand out in your mind?
Oh yes, and there are really so many that stand out, but I'd have to say one colleague who I had the utmost respect for, and he had an international reputation as well as a national reputation, and that was Richard Leftwich, Dr. Richard Leftwich. Dick was a graduate of the University of Chicago. He studied under Milton Friedman, the well-known economist, the market economist, who was a monetarist and believed in the role of monetary policy and a minimum of interference from the system if you had good monetary policy. And Dick Leftwich authored a book called On Price Theory. Dick's book became the bestseller nationally at that time of any price theory book in the country. Graduate students getting ready for their prelims in microeconomics would go buy Dick's book because it was so clearly written to get primed to take their prelim in microeconomics. And he was very active in professional associations. He brought Milton Friedman down for lectures on our campus. And so Dick clearly was one of these outstanding individuals. In fact, because of his national reputation, we can get into this later on, Dick didn't want to serve in administrative roles either. He was a scholar and a researcher and an outstanding teacher. But I finally talked Dick in, like I got talked into being head of the department, which brought us even more recognition because of his national reputation among the academicians.
What about Wilton Anderson?
Knew Wilton Anderson. He was a go-getter. He was a charger. He really would take off, and he went after top flight students. He sometimes got criticized in colleagues around the campus, because when he'd spot a good student, he'd write him a letter and said, you ought to come over and get in accounting. And some of the people got jealous. We were trying to rate our students. Well, he was an entrepreneur and a taskmaster. I mean, he really demanded a lot. And he'd go out and try to recruit the very best faculty. He'd call them stars. He was out after the stars. And the accounting department produced a lot of outstanding students, and there's a long record that substantiates that. And it was well recognized nationally. Now, before he came here, my hat goes off to Dean Swearingen because he recruited him, and Andy had been back east writing the CPA exams that they give to people across the country. So he came in, and he was a very, very, very strong leader. Another guy I had a lot of respect for was Russell Ball. He was laid back, a very thoughtful guy. He was head of our Department of Economics, and he worked extremely hard to get things done. Ansel Sharp was another colleague. He was a micro theorist, and at that day and time, I think there was a lot of camaraderie, particularly within the department. Periodically, we'd get together for lunch together and discuss things. And then at least once a month, we'd get together in one of our homes and discuss current economic issues, and we'd have give and take on those sessions. And that kind of camaraderie, even though we had maybe different positions on various aspects of economic problems, brought us closer together and made us a team. And so I remember those kind of individuals. I had some dear friendships that I got involved later on. I did a lot of reorganization. I felt I had to do this. I don't want to get into personalities and all. But when I came in, we had a large number of departments, and we didn't have the budget to take care of all those departments. And we had some people that were laid back, and they had one or two faculty members and called themselves department heads. I consolidated in about a year and a half. I consolidated about 8 departments into about 4 departments. That's where I made a big hit with the Regents. They said people are always coming in asking for bigger spread of stuff, and here you're consolidating. Now, there was a strategy to this. For example, normally in a college of business, you should have a department of marketing, a department of finance, and other kinds of departments listed here, finance and marketing and management. Well, we didn't have the spread there. Now, when I consolidated them, I renamed it administrative. I made the administrative sciences department, marketing, management, and so forth. We needed a PhD. We didn't offer a PhD in any of these areas. And I said, if I leave one legacy for this College of Business, it's to get it qualified to offer a PhD in business. So I charged out to get that done. I got word back that internally within the university, I'm getting a little personal here, a guy heard a conversation between people that were above me administratively. I said, gosh, Dick, I'm sorry you're not going to get that PhD program. I said, what do you mean? Well, I heard him talking that we've applied from OSU for too many PhD programs. They just don't feel we can get another one through the state regents. Well, I said to myself, I'll censor what I said to myself, Jerry. I said, I am upset with that. And I don't normally circumvent the system, but I told you, I think one of the reasons I was selected is because I had relationships in the state. I went state to the staff on the state regents. And I didn't say anything going on internally. I said, I just want to feel you out on something. I didn't say I'd been going to be turned down in-house or anything. I said, I think OSU, for the long term, must have a PhD program in business. And I said, we don't have all these departments now. It's in one area. And I'm going to call it that PhD in that area. But just one PhD is being offered, not in 3 departments, but it'll have a major in finance and marketing and management. They said, Dick, that makes a lot of sense. I said, would you be supportive of that if it got approved within our system? Why, sure, that makes a lot of sense. So now first, by combining these departments, I got one department. If I go ask for a PhD, I'm asking for one. They said, you're a smooth operator. You're eventually going to have 3 PhDs, but you're getting it through this one department, administrative sciences. That'll make it easier to get through. And that the grease was laid then. So I went back and I went to the people and they said, well, we don't think we get it through. And I said, oh, that's not a problem. I happened to visit and I said, here's what they told me. Oh, really, Dick? Oh, well, it went through and it sailed through, and I had the support of E.T. Dunlap. I had the support of the vice president in charge of academic affairs there. And Jerry, if there's any one thing I got done for that college, it was getting their PhD program. Now, later on, they expanded enough and got the resources that they went back out and created those departments, and each one had its PhD program. But think where we'd be today if I hadn't have been able to get that program through, or if I'd have sat back and said, oh, they're not going to let me put it through here. That would have been disaster. So there's that story. And
Dick, I like where you're going, and I'd like to follow up with a couple questions. In addition to PhD programs, what was your, maybe it's an overworked word, but what was your vision for the college? I mean, what were your major goals? Where did you feel like the college needed to go, and where did you try to take it in your tenure?
Well, one of the things that truly guided me, at times there was a gap between the business community and the academic community. And I took the stance that both the academic community and the business community had strengths and they had weaknesses. And I wanted to see the strengths of the academic community combined with the strengths of the business community for the development of the state of Oklahoma. And it was that kind of approach that maybe led Henry Bellman to say, I want you to head the Technical Services Act. You'll be fair with the people around the state, and to get that kind of a thing done. And so as we worked on that, it led to an innumerable number of opportunities that we would have not had otherwise, in my opinion.
In terms of some specific goals, I know you did some reorganization. You also did, I think you focused in terms of, I'm trying to think of the structure, would you call it, where you set your priorities and goals for the college?
Well, yeah, another thing now, wait a minute. I getting back to that basic question too, and I probably should have elaborated. Well, I wanted to see a closer working relationship. And then I'd go out to the business community and I'd say, I'm trying to bring these things together. Here's something. And they started giving us money. We didn't get money given to us before that. And then we'd come back. And then I tried to get people involved in helping with Oklahoma problems. We went through a period where academicians said, I don't want to fool with Oklahoma problems. I want to write for my journal, or I want to do this nationally, or I'll go to Washington. And I tried to sell Oklahoma. Out of that came guys like Larkin Warner, who nowadays is recognized to this day, even though he's retired in Oklahoma City, as one great OU graduate calls him, the economic laureate of Oklahoma. He worked on Oklahoma problems. And then I went with the Kerr Foundation, and we got a big study going where we blended together and got all of these things going. So it was by getting out and doing and helping with economic development that we got a lot of these things rolling along. Now, I had one other thing. That was that time. But one other thing that drove me was serving the students. And I said to the faculty time and again, if we do something, is this enhancing the opportunities for the student? And even I said, I really feel strongly about this. We bring a lot of kids in here as freshmen, and if we don't spend time with them, they get down on themselves. If they get down on themselves in their freshman year and lose their confidence, we've in effect, quote, killed them. And I worked hard to try and build up the relationship between faculty and students. I created the first Student Services Division, got Walter Starks, who later became a Major General, to head that program up. We worked hard to work with students. I involved the Business Student Council, and there's a story I want to tell you about if you give me a chance in a minute. But the Business Student Council, we did things. I was the first one to get evaluation of faculty by the students, and that was hard. People were threatened. I got a program through, and I sold it. I said, I will be the only one to see. It'll not be used against you. It'll be helpful. We've got to have this kind of a program. It was a long haul. I had one faculty member who had opposed it. There were several that didn't want to do it. We got it through. But then one day, some parents came to see me, and they brought their daughter. And they said, our daughter's got a professor that's just lousy. He doesn't do anything, and he's bad. He's mean to the students. Our daughter's told us all about him. Gave us a lot of stuff like that. And I said, oh, now let's see, what's that person's name? And I said, well, let me go check on this. And I said, has she been good? Oh, she's a good student. So I checked, and I encouraged them to keep attendance records. In fact, I said, golly, this girl's been absent about 40% of the time. Oh, we didn't know that. I said, now, let's see, you say she's a lousy teacher. I don't share this with people, but I'm going to share this with you. Here are the student evaluations. And I went down and they gave this professor high rank. I never had any more trouble with professors saying, I protected this professor from this somewhat influential person who was going to just raise Cain because this wasn't a good teacher. I refuted that. So I got that kind of balance through the whole system. I was really committed. And I used to also say to all of my administrators, whatever action we take, what does this do to enhance the productivity of our faculty in what they're trying to accomplish in teaching, research, and outreach, which I pushed outreach, as well as enhance the education of our students. Those aren't words, those are things I pushed, documented, and talked about all the time. And they paid off, I think, for us. Well, here I've gone rambling again, Jerry. Sorry about that.
You talk about the legacy. Looking back, what were some of the, and you probably alluded to some of these, but what were your major accomplishments in your 7-8 years there as dean?
Well, a lot of people focus on enrollment numbers. I'm not that big on enrollment, but you have to have it to maintain yourself. We had during my tenure, because of some programs we introduced, a roughly 50% increase in student enrollment. That was one. So we had an enrollment. The second thing, and probably the most important I told you, is getting the PhD program in business approved, established, and implemented. Another one was introducing the student evaluation forms for teaching and getting that going. Another one was our relationship with NASA. Because of my work there, and I served as a consultant to the administrator of NASA, which was James E. Webb, I was able to establish a program at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas, where we would send students down for the summer. And they would be given a research project. And they would work on that research project and then turn in the results to the people down there. I also arranged for faculty to have the similar types of activities. So we had hands-on management types of things going between NASA and us that was enhancing the faculty. Footnote, one of the people in that program was Bob Ham, who's over in the College of Business, so well known by everybody. He participated in that program as one of the professors. And one of the guys that's leading the School of International Studies now, was working on his MBA at that time, participated in that program, and that's Dr. James Romas. So we had a whole host of people, and that program I thought was very significant. Another one that I worked through my Business Student Council. I had a young man on there who was on the Business Student Council, and his parents had a company over in Muskogee. Well, we got to working together, and we agreed with his family that in the summer we'd take some of our brightest students, take them over there to that program, let them sit with the treasurer or the marketing guy or whoever it may be, and he would work with them, and then the guy'd go on vacation and leave them in charge for a little while. Mm-hmm. Now, that took a lot of time, and we didn't have the resources to do that broad scale, but we implemented that. Who was that student? One I was very proud of out of this particular group, a lot of them, but I have a picture of this Business Student Council. One of the guys, and it was his family, went on later, after he graduated, went to work for the company to get a doctorate, a medical degree. He is now the United States Senator Tom Coburn. Huh? Okay. Another one is Charlie Idle. He was in that same group. He went on and has been president of major corporations and major companies, etc. And he's in that group. Another one is a guy that worked with Boone Pickens and is now a millionaire in California. I take pride. That's my reward for being in the academic. Seeing these kind of people emerge as leaders. And I think our old College of Business helped provide them the kind of environment that they took off in and got that done. So these kinds of activities and programs, in my mind, kind of stand out. There are many others that I could mention that truly stand out. But getting that student services in there, creating that office and having that go, I also think was an important. So those are some of the legacies that I think were important to the college. At least I take a lot of pride in them, and they paid off.
Are you leaving out Poole Hall?
Oh, well, we did move.
Referred to, quote,
okay, we did move into a new building, and the students used to have a lot of fun. We got the new building, we got it all equipped, and it was designed for that building. And I mean, the thing was designed to enhance teaching. We had case study rooms and all the rest. Now, it was a nice new building at the time. Now it's an old building. They need to get a new one. But the students had a good time. They'd say, well, where are you going? He said, well, I'm going over to the pool hall. I'll meet you at the pool hall. And I used to tell a story when I'd make speeches and so forth. I said, now, no matter if I ever accomplished anything, which I never will, and they wanted to name a building after me, they could never name a building and say, that's the pool hall. That would never work, But the students had a great time with that kind of a thing.
Well, that was really a step up because, Dick, you guys were over in Moral Hall primarily, yeah. And could you kind of describe what it was like over there?
Now, on the one hand, some people said Poole took them downhill. He moved them from a moral hall, moral being moral in a different sense, to a pool hall. But Moral Hall was an old building. It was really a wonderful, wonderful old building, but it was not very new. And so that may have had a big impact on what we accomplished, and that building really did make a real difference in things. I don't know whether I won't elaborate more. Well, I've got to tell you one other story, and it ties in with my philosophy. We were trying to educate the entire student. And Raymond Young, the Y and TG&Y, some people will remember that. Those stores are now no longer in existence, but one of our graduates had over 500 retail stores spread throughout the United States and the rest. Raymond Young said, I'd like to do something for the new College of Business. Well, one thing I asked him to do was to furnish our conference room. I said, we don't have money now. Nowadays, you got a lot of money. Things look nice. I said, if we're going to compete, I got to have first-class conference room. Would you put the money up to get a conference room fixed up and furnished it? And he said, well, I'll do that. And he made it, and I put a little plaque on the door about it. But he said, I'd like to do a little more for that. And he said, I'd like to do something on landscaping. And I said, Raymond, you believe in the arts. I would like to take a grant from you and get an art collection to put throughout the College of Business, because I said, we're trying to educate students in the broadest sense, including an appreciation for the arts. And Raymond Young came forward and gave us, at this time, it was a lot of money, $25,000. And we bought one piece of art from each of our art faculty, and then we got gold reeds and some of those that were very valuable. Today they're quite valuable if they know where they are. We even got listed for a while in brochures from the state saying, visit the College of Business Art Museum. They had a big feature in the Sunday edition of the paper about this, and then it gave me a chance to talk how we're trying to educate the students. I also furnished a student lounge for the students, and I had faculty come up and say, that's a waste of money. The kids will come in and tear it all up. I said, if you put the kids in a dumpy environment, they'll be dumpy. If you put them in a good environment, I've got more faith in them. We created that nice first-class lounge, and the kids kept it up. I've always had faith in young people. Yeah, I've had some run-ins, but I've had run-ins with old people that turned out not to be so hot. So creating that art collection, in my own mind, fit in with this whole pattern of things that we were trying to do. And so those are just some of the things that stand out, ranging from an art collection to student evaluation to consolidation of departments for efficiency. I even transferred some classes to arts and sciences because of duplication. People say, why are you giving up credit hours? I said, because it's the right thing to do. And the only thing I did, I went to White Everest and I said, don't you ever penalize me on giving these up. I want more money to promote my faculty. I'm not proliferating faculty positions, but I want more for salary, and I got good salary increases for the people. So I felt blessed that I worked with people at that time, Bob Com and Whitehurst, that supported me and gave me those pushes. We also led the movement on letting women be a little more flexible in their dress. I also recruited the first black lady as a teacher that ever came in. I believed in the development of ladies, and we created programs there that at least helped kick off improvement in that area. So I keep rambling here. My memory's coming back as I think about these, and I'm sorry, Jerry, that I ramble so much on those.
No problem. Okay. Dick, just picking up on your question, kind of your things you accomplished in your time there, Dean. How about some special memories? There's some special, you've indicated some people and things, but there's some special events, memories that you have that stand out as your time as Dean?
Gosh, in all honesty, there's so many. I still remember, honestly, and this is true, my association with a lot of the students, especially on the Business Student Council. I also, as a part of this program of enhancing our recruiting, enhancing our relationship with the students, I would write every parent a letter or send them a carbon copy of the letter that I sent to a student that made the dean's honor roll or the president's honor roll. And I remember I would sign them. And some of my colleagues and other colleagues said, well, how do you have time to do that? I said, if a student can work that hard to get a good grade, the dean could spend enough time to personally sign it. To this day, I run across parents who said, I've saved those letters that we've gotten, Dean Poole, and that meant so much to us. I also enhanced and expanded the honors and awards banquet. We got to where we filled the entire ballroom and could only accommodate the maximum capacity. And we'd invite all of the parents to come to that. And we'd brag on the young people. That clearly stands out as one of the things that I remember, that involvement with those individuals. One that I remember very much is my relationship with Fred Harris, the United States Senator. We were having some severe problems in the nation, as you'll remember, with the Vietnam situation. And one of the problems we had, I worked with the Senator and with Washington, D.C., to have what we call the National Manpower Conference here. It was actually a recording of a meeting of the United States Senate Subcommittee on Government Research. And I even co-chaired a little of that. Fred Harris brought it here. We had speakers from all across the country and people coming from Europe, and we filled the auditorium in the New Student Union. And that brought this school a lot of recognition. So I have those kind of memories of those kind of activities and outreach. I also pushed economic education, and we worked with bringing ministers in to explain how the market economy worked. We had a big program going there. We worked, look, let's face it, most American, this is not a put down, are economically illiterate. They don't understand how a free market economy operates and what its strengths and weaknesses are. And the economic education program was aimed at trying to get a better appreciation for that, rather than just be emotional and use terms that we didn't understand or say anything about. One other story I've got to share that stands out. When I became dean, Oliver Wilhelm called me over. No, he came to see me. And he said, Dick, I'm going to give you a packet of material. Now, the people are all deceased on this, or I wouldn't tell you this story. I'm going to give you a packet of material that now only you and I know exists. You have a person on the faculty that at one time was a member of the Communist Party. But this person just went to some meetings and got involved. It's been thoroughly investigated, and it's not a problem. But we have all this file, the original charges that came in, and you will be the keeper of that. And I want you to know about it. There's nothing un-American here. And there was a time of the Joe McCarthy era that there was a lot of problems, and emotional people charged off, as they do today on certain issues. I had that file. This particular faculty member was good. In fact, I'd had the faculty member as a teacher. He never knew I had this, no one knew. He got an assignment, an opportunity to go overseas. This was after I'd been dean for 3 or 4 years. And I had a visit by the FBI. No. Now, before this, I had letters, and they said, we're over here in Europe, but something's on hold. We can't go perform our duty. We're just stymied here. They won't regress us, and we don't know what's going on. Well, I didn't know what was going on, but they were stymied, and something was being held up that they couldn't go to their assigned function. They're just living, existing over there. The FBI came, and they said, we're doing some checking. Do you know anything about this particular professor? I got up and said, just a minute, gentlemen. I went and I shut the door, and I said, yes, I do. I told them the story about Oliver Wilhelm. I told them the story how we had checked things out, or Oliver had. I laid everything out for them. We discussed this in great detail. They said, Dean Poole, thank you. You didn't come in, you laid everything out for us. You told us it, and we really appreciate this. 2 weeks later, I got a telegram from the people in Europe. We don't know what's happened. We've been cleared and we're moving ahead with our project. To this day, outside of a few close friends now, that story hadn't been told. Well, there's a life that was saved because I had been given this information by a great man, Oliver Wilhelm. I kept it to myself, but I had the knowledge, as he said, if you ever have a question, you'll know how to deal with it. And it saved that man's reputation. He lived the rest of his life before he died as a productive member. And he was not a communist. I want to make that clear. Yeah. Anyways, I thought that was really some story.
Dick, were you doing the econometric model then, the forecasting? Did that start as part of your work?
Yes, I developed relationships, and that was really got that going more when I became a vice president. I had close working relationships with the Kerr Foundation. And we decided with bringing Kerr and Bob Jr. and to some extent Bill to undertake a big, huge study of government expenditures. And I got Ansel Sharp and Larkin Warner and Bob Sandmeyer to work on that. They got paid in the summer to go. We did this massive study. Out of that came the basis for the econometric model and that relationship, and got funded, which is now an integral part and a carry-on of the College of Business activities to this day.
Maybe we should explain that a little bit, what an econometric model is, forecasting.
Well, in the simplest terms, it's like if you'd build a model of a building, and what does it look like? Well, we would build models of the economy. Here's what the
State of Oklahoma, right?
State of Oklahoma. Here's what the economy is. Here's this sector, this business sector. If you put money in here, or employment goes up here, what does that ricochet through the economy? And then what's impacts it going to have on state gross product, state income, and taxes and all the rest? So we built this model of the Oklahoma economy, and that is the basis for the economic forecast that the College of Business now does annually from that model that they built. And we had a good working relationship there with the Kerr Foundation to get that going.
Just as we kind of get away in this one area one more time, a lot of contacts that you helped make for the college externally. Is there any individuals you'd cite or think about that were significant that you'd help develop a relationship with?
Well, I tied in with the presidents of most companies, both in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. I made a point of working with the local chamber of commerce. See, when I came there, I joined the local chamber. I believed you had to have outreach. A lot of faculty didn't. I was only the third guy to ever serve as president of the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce. Now, it's very common nowadays to have people from OSU do it. But at the same token, I got involved at the state level, and I worked with the State Chamber of Commerce, and I served on the board of directors there. So I had access to the presidents of all the companies in the state, and they appreciated me. I wasn't going to them when I went to see them saying, would you help me or give me something? If I did, it was after I had gone and helped on work in the state, and they had a respect for me. And that's where I got a lot of extra money to support things. I'd go say, here's what I'm trying to do. Could you give us $10,000 a year or whatever it is? And I had support coming in every year to help with this kind of thing, to help with the special student scholarships and all the rest. Now, given that, there are a number of people that made a big difference in my life. One was Stanley Draper Jr., senior. He, the Mr. Oklahoma City, he did so much, and he took a fancy to me, and he wanted me to stay in the chamber work. But then once I got into academic, we had a close working relationship, and I learned so much from him. My real mentor was James E. Webb, who I'd mentioned before. He had been a successful businessman. He had been vice president of Sperry Corporation. His brother was captured on Wake Island in World War II. At the time, he was a vice president of a big corporation. He signed up in the Marines and was an aviator in that. He was a Phi Beta Kappa. He came back after the war, and he went to work in Washington, D.C. for a while. He was appointed by Harry Truman as director of the U.S. Bureau of the Budget. He was later tapped as Undersecretary of State. And he's the guy that called Henry G. Bennett to go head up the Point Four program for the Truman administration. James E. Webb was truly my mentor. And he helped me financially. He helped me make contacts. And he was just my mentor. And he helped us when we went back to school to get my PhD. He had 3 kids. And I went to him, and I've told this story at commencement when I got the Henry G. Bennett Award, which, is the highest award OSU can give. And I said, I want to share this story with you students. I told him a story that I couldn't have gone. Mr. Webb helped me, as well as Admiral Kirkpatrick, or John Kirkpatrick, financially some. And I said to Mr. Webb, now, Mr. Webb, I want to pay you someday. And I said, I knew he'd say, oh, no, Dick. But he surprised me. He said, I expect you to. And I said, yes, sir. How do I start? He said, first of all, no matter whether you go on into education, or you go into business, or you go into government, you're going to be successful enough that you can help other people as I've helped you. And you've got to promise me to do that. And the second thing he said, no matter if you get into the academic or where it is, you must give some of your time to public service at the local level. Don't act like a big shot that you can't get involved in a small town at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, and if possible, the international level. I tried to honor those 2 things. I have been successful enough. We now have scholarships that we support. We have a Distinguished Service Fellowship. Now, a lot of people contributed to that as well as ourselves. We have 2 PDSs, and I'm trying to help other students, and I help them in other ways. I've tried to behind the scenes. I've done things like that.
PDS is President's
President's
Endowed Scholarship.
Yeah, and now I think the endowment's around, it's way up there now, but they're normally around $50,000 to get them endowed. And I have those programs. And then as I've served in these national positions, I went, as I mentioned, I spent time as president of the local chamber. I did other things like that. But you know the one thing I learned? The more I did, the more I owed, because I gained so much from all of those things that it's come back. And Jerry, even that guided me on trying to help you when you wanted to go see, there's the tie back to Mr. Webb, and where you can see a direct impact as I tried to help you get your doctorate back there. Not a big way, it was modest, but you led the way in that wonderful book on OSU's international involvement. And so Mr. Webb was truly my mentor, and then John Kirkpatrick was also. And these people had a real impact on my life. And so I can mention so many, but those in particular. And most of the students I talk to, I think, I always tell them someday you can help and you need to come back and do the same thing.
Great. Dick, I know this was a good time in your life. I mean, you can tell from our conversation at the college and certainly as dean, but a higher calling. Come on, again, is a conversation offline you had. You'd really never look for a job. It always kind of looked you up. Can you give us a little background about how you got into vice president position?
Well, as I said, Dr. Calm came to me one time, and he wanted me to move over to Whitehurst as vice president for business and finance. They were having a change there, and they were creating the position. And I didn't want to go, and that really wasn't what I wanted to do, to tell you the truth. But he said, Dick, you've got to come. He's really putting the pressure on me. And so at the time, I went back to my department heads, and I'm sure this didn't last for long, but I'd been there about 5 years. And I said, the president's after me, and I said, I don't really want to go, but how do you guys feel about it? Well, they didn't want me to go because I guess they knew I was trying to fight on their behalf. And I figured that was my role, represent them well. And they in turn represent our faculty and create an environment for them to be productive. So they all wrote letters and went over to see the president and said, leave Poole alone. We want him where he is. And I was relieved, and we went on and accomplished many more things. Then he came to me in 72 and he said, Dick, we've got to create this new position for outreach, vice president for development and outreach programs, and later I had extension, not the part of agriculture, but outreach in the communities and those programs. And he said, I've really got to have you over here. Well, after a while, I said, okay, I will accept this position. But I did stay in the College of Business to see them through their national accreditation. And that was accomplished in 72. And then I moved over to the job, and full time, I had both jobs for a short period of time as dean and vice president. And then I moved over as vice president with Dr. Com and had a lot of wonderful experiences there with him.
Dick, as I think about it, let me back up just a minute and ask one question that I kind of missed a little bit about the college. Haven't left, but you closely to your time as vice president, I'm sure, since. Do you still stay in touch with the college? I mean, in the sense of when you're asked to, but you still have connections. And then maybe a follow-up question is, and how do you view the college now? And I say college, it's the Spear School of Business now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first rule I had was once I left, there were some people that thought I, rightly or wrongly, that I'd been a pretty strong and effective dean. I have to say that because of what I'm going to lead into. And given that, some people were saying, God, I wouldn't want to follow Poole because he'll be looking over their shoulder and all. I had a rule. Once I walked away from that college, I didn't go back over there unless I was invited for something. I never criticized anything. I never told the dean what to do. I did tell whoever was dean, my door is always open on a confidential basis if you want my input. But I'm not going to ever tell you what I think you ought to be doing. I'm going to treat you just like I'd treat any other dean in our day-to-day operations. And I did have deans that would eventually come to me and say, Dick, and I'd say, okay, it's confidential. And they'd ask my counsel on something, and I would give it to them. But I never went back over there. And later, when I fully retired from the university, I said, I'll never go back over there and have an office because there's too many imaginary problems that can be developed in people's minds as you're trying to control things. Now, I've always maintained love and appreciation for the College of Business. And the College of Business, when Bob Sandmeyer came in there, who was the third PhD graduate out of our program, did an unbelievable job. And then when he came in, we were getting better funding, and he was able to take the program and expand it back out to where they had a Department of Finance, a Department of Marketing, and the rest. The other had served its purpose. Administrative sciences had grown significantly, and it went back, and these departments were created. Bob gave great leadership. He had many innovative programs, and I was able to support some of them through what I called university extension. I used to follow the model of, I'll give you some seed money and see if you can make it grow into things. And one of the ventures I backed was his program on the Management Executive Briefing Program and the Tulsa Business Forum, which have become invaluable tools, not only for the college, but for the university. I put seed money into that. I should have also mentioned way back there that we did a book on the on the Oklahoma economy. Dick Leftwich, myself, Rudy Trenton, and Ansel Sharp. That's where we first got back involved in things. I should have mentioned that way back there. But Bob had all this impact on our college. He created the CBA Associates. He modernized things. He got rid of some programs that needed to be changed over time. He expanded the graduate programs, and he gave great leadership. And I'm very pleased that we now have Sarah over there as dean, and she's giving very good leadership. She's very committed to the college and trying to do a lot. So anytime I can be of assistance. Now, when I retired, Bob Sandmeyer was still dean, and he said, we've got to expand our international activities, Dick. And he said, we're having trouble getting some of this going. Maybe it's a little current to be saying that, but would you come back, even though you're retired, and chair this committee on international relations and so forth? I went back then and chaired, and we had lots of meetings. We got a lot of programs going. We developed out of that the London School of Economics. We got people involved in international programs and all the rest. And then, of course, all this fed in. Eventually, Steve Miller got involved in all of these things and became very active at the state level and national level on this stuff. So all of those activities, I still do anything I can when the College of Business asks me. I still go to the College of Business Associates. The business community was very kind, along with a few friends, in establishing the Richard W. Poole Professorship for Excellence. The dean holds that and uses the money to enhance operations in that college, not to put in her pocket, but puts that money in. She supports graduate students going to deliver papers. They give out awards for teaching and research and extension or outreach programs. And they've been kind enough to name even some of those. I'm getting a lot of mileage out of that thing. Some of the Richard W. Poole Award for outreach or what, they have a stipend with them. And so I still have a lot of ties to the college, but never coming with any dean to say, hey, you ought to be doing this or that. And I just don't do that.
See a bright future for the
I certainly
school.
do. And with the entrepreneurship program, I think that'll take off. And I think they've got an outstanding person coming in to head that up. The name has escaped me. I've seen the credentials. I've seen him on TV, a relay that we had prepared. And I think the sky's unlimited. But still, our basic mission is to take care of those kids and to have impact on Oklahoma as well as the nation and the world. We must always help serve our state and help our economy grow and prosper where we can. Back to what I said early on. We have strengths. The business community has strengths. Oklahoma's going to be a heck of a lot better place if we marry the strengths of both groups to help build Oklahoma into a greater state.
Well, so when you moved over to Vice President of University Relations Development, then later Extension, along with it, some different opportunities in that area. I'll put it that way. Well, first of all, maybe just could you share with us some of the units that reported to you?
Well, yes, when we went over there, at that time, the OSU Foundation was in the university as a part of the university. And that was one of the units. Public information was in that area. And I got that area. The Alumni Association was in it. KOSU was involved in that. And so we had all of these outreach. Now, Merle Rogers was
High school and college relations was part of that.
Yeah, oh yes, and high school and college relations, which was a kingpin. And I got to say something about high school and college relations. Our enrollment was down at the time. Bob Comm had recruited Russ Conway, who was the epitome of the effective high school and college relations director. He was out in that field. He knew the counselors and all the rest. The true story of his contributions has never fully been told, and I'm just sorry for that, because he did so doggone much to get things moving in that whole area. Our enrollment was down. We implemented early off a massive program, and we started with a letter writing program. They were sending letters out from the colleges uncoordinated. They wouldn't even sign the dang letters. They had to just be stamped because the guys thought they were swimming. Well, wrong statement. They didn't. And so I worked very hard to pull all of this together. We got a coordinated letter writing program. We enhanced the visitation program and got all of that going. And as a result, our enrollment started increasing significantly. And we had a big increase. And Jerry, you played a role in that because you were out there as a young guy helping us do this.
Assistant director under Russell, and you're right, he was a great guy, and his story really should be told
Yes.
better. Dick, one of the things that you and I have talked about before, could you share a little bit your sort of your market philosophy of student recruitment. Some people don't like to use that word marketing, but truly, part of the genius at that time was having high school and college relations, which is now undergraduate admissions office, but having under the umbrella of a marketing unit with you is that we took more of a marketing approach. Could you share your philosophy?
Well, yeah, we had all kinds of, we brought together the strengths of the Alumni Association, high school and college relations, public information for a whole integrated program. And so we developed very attractive brochures. We developed a movie that Merle Rogers was a leader here that really was effective. He hired the people to show it. Then we had the honors banquets. We'd go to all of these counties around the state, and we'd have these honors programs and invite the top students in and bring your parents. Then where we could, we'd try to invite graduates that were outstanding, maybe the president of Kerr McGee or whoever it was, sit up at the head table, and they would represent OSU. And then we would tie into the fundraising scholarships for these people. Our brochures were integrated and sent out to the students, and Russell would coordinate all of the contacts, not only with high schools, but with junior colleges, because we could get junior college transfers. To have an integrated marketing approach, you had to have all of these units, your publications, your PIO, your alumni association, yes, even the foundation in an indirect way, all pulling together to get this thing done. And I think when you separate these things, get tied up with these other titles, you lose a lot. But that's, I mean, I know things change. All I can tell you, success speaks for itself. Go look at the record.
And the record is
Rome increases. At one time, we even passed OU.
in head count.
In head count.
Yeah, I mean, in FT also, but head count.
Yep, we did.
Dick, do you remember, I certainly clearly remember your market segmentation, high market?
Oh, yes.
Average market, low market, or you had?
Yeah.
It's high, good, average, and low market.
Yeah, and we had the markets identified, and we'd concentrate our resources. Absolutely.
Markets were the schools, which were high schools we
That's
go to.
right.
Most office, what kind of service
That's right.
we provide.
And where do you spend your time? You know, we never neglected anybody, but we concentrated where we spent some of the time.
Even the low market, as I recall, we wouldn't contact them, but if they contact us, we'd go visit them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you had a very small, you got to face it, place it at a handful of people, you're not going to spend the same amount of resources there that you spend going to a big high school in Oklahoma City or in Tulsa or Bartlesville or Muskogee or wherever it may be, or Enid.
So there's some different challenges in development and fundraising. You share some of your issues there?
We went through a difficult time there. We had some personnel problems that were very, very difficult. We had problems of health with people. Well, I don't think it's inappropriate. Time has passed. We had some alcoholic problems at times. I faced that in a number of areas. I always kept them quiet. I've got to share one story with you. I could be tough, but I was also a pussycat in some ways. But we had one fellow, wasn't here in this. It was when I was back in the college. I'll share it, but I had similar problems in the VP's role. And this guy was an alcoholic. And I called him in one time. I said, "Now, we can't put up with this anymore. You've got to deal with this." "I will, Dr. Poole." So he got in trouble again. I called him in again. I said, "Now, I'm going to send you up to this clinic if you can deal with it. But I said, if you don't come through on this, I'm going to get you out of here. It's up to you." "Well, I'll do it." He got in trouble. He had an auto wreck. He'd been drinking. So I had to encourage him, rather than embarrass him, to resign. He did. Left the college. Vice president. He came back to see me. He said, "Dr. Poole, I've come back to see you. I want to tell you why. I want to thank you. And I want to apologize to you for both." He said, "No human being gave me more chances when I was having my problems." He said, "I'm on the wagon now. I'm a good man now." But he said, "You encouraged me. You offered to help me. You gave me chances. And you finally had to encourage me to get out." And I left. He said, "Dr. Poole, I had to reach rock bottom to start recovering. And I just wanted you to know I had to go that route And now I've got a good life. I'm a productive member. But I always remember how you tried to help me and did everything I wanted you to know. I just had to go to rock bottom before I could pull myself out. And I appreciate that. Well, we had problems in other areas. When I went into the vice presidency, we got those resolved.
We were bottom of the Big Eight in fundraising.
Oh,
we got a late start in it.
We had no fundraising capabilities back there. We just gotten started. Actually, in the 60s, they created the foundation. And we made some changes there early on, by the way. I went to see Bud Saratine early on. This is one of the bigger gifts we ever got. And of course, I was always wanting to represent the college. But Bud talked at one time about he'd like to have a dormitory named after him if he did something. And so I went to see him, and he said he's ready to try and do something. And I said, Bud, we spent 3 days with him. I said, I'm going to tell you something. I'm bringing you down a picture. This is what we'd like to see as a performing arts center at OSU. I said, it's your money, but I feel obligated to tell you what this could mean versus a dormitory. And I want you to just listen. Well, I don't know. Listen to us. I presented that and told him why it was important. And I said, I'd like for all the money to go to the College of Business, but we need this more for OSU's image and to be effective as a state university to show we have an appreciation for the performing arts. When he came back for the groundbreaking, a lot transpired that finally led, yes, he's going to do it. He called me at the side and he said, and he was a pretty dominant guy. He said, Dick, I want to tell you something. What's that? He said, I appreciate you just telling me it wasn't your money, but you wanted to give me a suggestion to think about because this was the right thing to do. And I feel good about that, you know. I really feel good about that, leading to that kind of a thing. But anyways, we got the program going. I did hire Charles Platt, who had been with Conoco, and he had a lot of contacts, and he came up, and I think we made a lot of progress. The foundation started going. We developed a lot of new programs. He developed that PDS program and other programs like that. And as I think back on it, you stumble at times, but we had one philosophy that guided us. We've got a lot of building to do, and we've got to have the friend raisers, which friend raisers being wherever we can, including the Alumni Association, and then we got the fundraisers. And you don't go out and meet our alumni the first time and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. You establish a rapport with them. You tell them how you're servicing, or like I used to do with the College of Business, I'm serving Oklahoma. By the way, you can help me by giving me money to continue this service, you know. And that, I think, started paying off for us. And anyways, my bottom line is this. We will develop some cultivations today that we won't see the dollar benefits of, but those that come after us will see it. And you see that today at OSU, here and there, all over the place. People we developed and got them started on small giving, and they became large donors. And we've got a terrific alumni group now, and we've got people that are so committed in giving, you can just look at the record. And the progress, Jerry, that's been made, you well know, is really unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you, I got to say again, played an important role in all of this. You served in so many capacities. And I love Merle Rogers. He was a great director. He was the right man for the time. And when Jerry Gill stepped in, he was the right man for the time. And I'm just going to say this. Jerry Gill is Mr. Alumni, what he's done on bringing the alumni together, building a base throughout the state, tireless energy, and that building up there, which is such a center right there in the heart of the campus. I say, as Larry Boger would say, I tip my hat to you.
One quick question you may recall. Were you part of the decision, I guess it's not a secret, but we were having some fundraising issues in athletics that got us on probation. We were back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And we created a position for athletic fundraising. It's going to be in the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Larry Boger has come on board. I think Dick Young is athletic director. Were you part of that discussion about creating that director of athletic gift programs in that office?
Yeah, I was a part of that, and they needed that, but it goes back even before that. In Bob Combs' administration, if you went back, this is digging back a ways, there was a group of well-meaning alumni who wanted to do some things, and they wanted to support, and they were circumventing the rules. And I remember being invited to a small meeting in the old president's dining room right off of the cafeteria. This dates it back there in the student union. And they said, here's what we have planned, and we want to raise the money out here, and we're soliciting the people. And I said, we can't be a part of that. Well, Dick, you got to be a part of this because that's the only way we're going to succeed in athletics. I said, no, it can't work that way. And I didn't get argumentative. But I came back and then I talked to one of the people in that group who later became very prominent. I said, I need your help. We can't go this route. And I can't have the university affiliated with it. And Bob Com can't be affiliated with it. This person supported me. And we were able to pull it away from the institution. So we got separated. Some of that may have continued for a while afterwards. But boy, we divorced it from this institution and asked for it not to be done. So when the investigations later claimed that was all external to the university. It would have been very easy to be popular with some of those people at the time and say, oh, that's well-meaning, we're going to do with you whatever you want. We said we can't do it. And I very well, and then that's when we said we've got to have a fundraising arm over there that's legitimate to raise money for athletics. Do it the right way. Be up front and no under the cover handing out money to players and all that kind of stuff. And don't want to, well, I've been pretty blunt there on what went on, and I'm not naming any names. There's nothing to be gained by that. But that led to the job that you later took over there under Dick Young. And you got the Posse Club, all that stuff going, which is legitimate. And it's on board, and it's up front. Never any criticism of that. Some of the people still affiliated with that, and some of the things that they did do did hurt the university later on.
Duke, what were some of the challenges that you had? I mean, we've spoken to some of the issues, but just overall general challenges that, looking back, you remember issues that you had to address as Vice President of University Relations and Development Extension?
Well, one I touched on was getting the foundation structured and set up, I thought, to where it was accountable and responsive. We redrafted, got with Dean Stringer early on, and we redrafted the bylaws, all of it, so it'd be a more effective, transparent organization. Dean Stringer, who later became a member of the Board of Regents, he and I worked on getting all of that done. They'd had a system of not really changing presidents. I prevailed upon Raymond Young to bring credibility to it, to be the new president, and he took that job, came down to Oklahoma City and said, I got to have you. Oh, I don't want to get in there. I said, we've got to have you, Raymond. He succumbed, like I succumbed to some things when the pressure's on. That was a challenge to get that thing cleared up, moving and going in the right track, and other problems were dealt with, and that was certainly accomplished. Certainly at the time, everyone was upset with the enrollment declines and so forth. So that integrated marketing program, the strategies that we worked out, that you were a part of, the identifying. And then to deal with a lot of these problems, Jerry, I introduced what I call management by objectives that we use. Now, I didn't want the traditional management.
Managed by obsession, so
yeah.
some call it.
I didn't want it to be like the traditional people. It could get so cumbersome. They had people like at one of the big corporations, even the secretaries filling it out. That's a waste of time. But we tried to set up objectives that were measurable on a yearly basis, and then we'd have goals, and our objectives would fit in with the goal. And it might be, we're going to try to get this many more honors banquets presented. We're going to try to reach this many more students. That became our benchmark on getting a lot of these things done and implemented on time. Because the big problem is there's so many demands on your time that pretty soon you're spreading yourself so thin you can't get anything done. As I once told you, it's not all the things that you can do, it's what you're able to do. You've got to focus. And those really helped us focus on some of the issues that we needed to focus on. So that program of management by objectives, getting everyone to sing off the same sheet of music, being sure that we weren't duplicating each other and moving in the same direction. Also, a problem that we always faced was the territorial position of most of us in administration. The deans wanted to protect everything in their bailiwick, and they didn't care. This is just human nature about the other deans. Departments the same way. To try and get people to overcome those issues and look at the big picture. How do you get them to be more? First, we got to say, how do we fit in? Look, we're a part of the university. How do we fit in to make this a greater university, and what is our role? That was a difficult challenge that was never completely solved. But the one way we went about it, talked to President Com, and we decided we'd have a president's retreat. So we took the deans and the vice presidents and went off for 2 days, 2 nights and days. And we had a prepared agenda. We discussed hot issues and the rest. That eventually led to the President's Planning Council, which became an institution that helped us get over. Now, the funny thing is, I'd always set up a good social evening, formal dinner, bring your wives, and we'd have programs for them other times. This was a fun, and we established rapport with each other and found out we've all kind of nice guys or nice gals, and we've got some things in common, and we can have a good time together, and then we can get in and do our business too. So the informal part of that was an important part in getting us to, as Larry would say, let's try and sing off the same sheet of music. And I thought that was another big challenge that we had. Another one was to get people to realize that we had to be accountable to the people of Oklahoma. If we didn't respond well to them, or we put them down, they were going to come back and bite us. And so I also had the responsibility of dealing with the legislature. And that was a tough job. And I bit my tongue many a day when I was dealing with those people. But I had a philosophy that I worked on. How do you allocate your time? So I identified who the speaker was. And of course, you know who it is. And I became as close as I could be to them. And then I would arrange periodically. I'll give you one example. A speaker would come in and I'd say, all right, Mr. Speaker, as we're getting ready to go, I'm going to invite Speaker so forth and his wife, and we'll meet in Oklahoma City for dinner, and you invite Mrs. Boger and I'll invite Lynn. We'd have an evening together, we'd talk about things, and this is best to illustrate. This one speaker said, all right, now, Mr. President, he said, I know you guys want to do what's right. There'll be times we won't agree with you. But he said, anytime you have a problem and you think we're mistreating you, or you want to get a message to us, we may not be able to adjust everything you want, but you've got an avenue, you ask Dick Poole to come and tell me about it. Those channels were established. And that's where I was able to go communicate issues to the leadership. This is our priority. We can get by without this, but here's this. Also, with the outreach, we had some people that just said they didn't care what the legislature said. Well, some of them can be pretty mean and petty. We blocked most of that, and I was able to work with them, and had a pretty good rapport, I thought, with those people. But I worked at it hard. But that was another big challenge, to work in that area. To get people to realize that we couldn't be all things to all people was always a challenge. And to say we got to focus on these areas and get people to eliminate some programs. No one wanted to eliminate anything, and I fought that. Also, the deans didn't care about outreach programs very much. And I said one dean was earning some money with this program and transferring it to faculty for research, and I said, I'm going to cut your funding off. You can invest that money any way you want to, but it's going to be to enhance outreach. Well, we don't. I said, that's the way it's going to be. That's about the only time I got dictatorial. I'll give you entrepreneurship money, but you're not going to siphon it off. You've got to believe in this mission that you're carrying out. And to this day, we have trouble with full outreach. But listen, we're doing so good. Our people are involved. We've made progress. That's all I can do. And that's why Burns Hargis is the right man at this stage of our history. He's got the outreach. He's got the confidence. And our university is going to continue to grow and prosper even more so. We've had great growth, great prospering, and it's going to get better.
Dick, speaking of President Hargis, you've worked with President Wilhelm, President Com, President Boger, certainly in your time. Can you share some of your thoughts about the different presidents that you served under?
Well, one must really be careful here. They were all different people, and I'll be honest with you, most of the presidents I could totally respect. The thing that I guess I judged the president to start with about was a character of human personality. I am a guy that believes in loyalty. Now, do we have a president, or am I going to work for a president that I can go to and he'll say, tell me what's on your mind, Dick, and he would listen. Now, you see, just giving orders is not enough. You got to listen. And I'd say, can I have a president that would listen to me if I have a legitimate concern? Do I feel free to go and say, Mr. President, we're taking this policy, but I've got to communicate with you. Here are my concerns, and I'm not coming unless I can articulate them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he would take them into account. I could do that with Bob Com, and I did it many times. And I went to Bob Com, and sometimes he'd say, Dick, you've made a good point. We're going to reverse. And he overruled legal counsel in some areas and some things like that where they were looking at it in narrow focus. On other occasions, Bob Com said, now, Dick, what you don't understand is this variable and this variable. And I say, Mr. President, I understand. I'm on board. Let's go. It's that ability to communicate. You got to have to, and you got to believe that both the president and you want to build the university, not themselves. Bob Com really wanted to build OSU. He was an honorable man who really cared about people. He and Maxine both. It wasn't a false deal. Somebody die or something, who's the first people there, as busy as they were? It was the Coms, if they knew. They always showed up. His people emphasis program, that epitomizes what Bob and Maxine were about. Now, I had a disagreement with Bob on his speaker's policy. I'll be honest with you on that. But we worked together through that, and we had a good process. I respected Bob Com. We had a close relationship, and we would kid each other. We'd be out late at night doing programs. We tied in with OU and would work together. I put on joint appearances along with my counterpart at OU to show that we were tied together as universities, going around the states with Paul Sharp and Bob Com, making addresses all over the state. We worked as a team. We'd be out late at night. And sometimes, a little story, we'd come back, and on the east side of Oklahoma City on the interstate, there's that sewer smell, as you're driving along. And we got the habit that we'd be driving along there, and we knew what was coming, And Bob would say, Dick, did you do something? Or I'd say, beat him, Bob, I'm embarrassed, And we'd have that kind of humor. The other thing, we'd go to functions, and Bob would say, now, I don't drink, so Dick and I make a good team. I do the driving, and Dick does the drinking for us. No, Bob was a great guy, and he was always supportive of me, and if he told me I was wrong and pointed the facts, I was with him. But I could go to him. Now, Oliver Wilhelm, he was always supportive. I didn't get to work that closely with him, but I had the greatest admiration for him. He was always supportive of me. And one time I remember I was popping off on something I shouldn't have, and he got me straightened out right in a hurry. And I said, thank you, Oliver, and I appreciate it, But I was blessed to the time I had to work with him. And after he retired, man, I invited him to every function. I recognized Oliver Wilhelm. I've seen too many people. you know, there is a tendency to kind of forget, there was anyways, a tendency to forget those who contributed so much. I honored Will Ham until his death. I had the highest admiration for him. Same way with Bob Comm. You and I shared that belief. And Bob Comm, from my standpoint, was a great president. As with all of us, the more he was in the job, the more he learned, the more effective he was, and the greater he grew. He did so much for this university after he left the presidency, the Centennial History Series and all the rest. Well, moving on, after he left, Larry Boger came in. Larry was a different kind of personality. But the one thing, can I communicate with this guy and the rest? And it worked the same with him. I could go in and say, Mr. President, I remember one time he would always tell this story. I went to him when he first came, and he said, he said, they're trying to get me to go down here in the community and be tied in with the chamber. And he said, you know, a lot of these places where I've been, we don't fool around with that. And I said, Mr. President, you need to go there and participate. And he'd tell it like that. I mean, Dick said, you need to go down there. He said, smartest move I ever made. And we had presidents later that said, I'm too busy for them. And they ate that president's lunch alive. And so this president would listen, and he'd call me at times behind the scenes and say, well, what do you really think of this? And I'd go through some good point, but you didn't take this into account in this and here. I said, I got you, Mr. President. I could always, he would listen. So I was blessed on working with Bob Comm, who would listen. In the time, what little time I had Oliver, that was my experience with it. And then I'd get my marching orders, and I was ready to march because we were together. The same thing with Larry Boger. When he came in, we were going through all that scandal and stuff. He worked so hard to straighten all of that out. Night and day, getting calls. He handled some difficult things. I'm going to say one other thing about him. You could be in the worst of circumstances, and Larry had a philosophy of saying the leader's got to be positive. If he's not, it's going down the tube. And I'll tell you a story. When I was trying to raise the money for a professorship in Larry's name, I got the former governor, Nye, on the committee to help us. And he said, Dick, I'm going to tell you a story about Larry. We were going through the financial crisis and all the rest. And he said, I'll never forget this. Larry was down there, and I was bemoaning everything and how bad things were. And Larry said, Governor, I need to tell you something. He said, you're our leader. You've got to be positive. Even though it hurts, you've got to be positive. And I'm stretching it out. I mean, I won't tell you the whole thing. I won't stretch it out. The governor said, you know, he was absolutely right, and I followed that. Larry followed that. When we were going through the crises up there, he could even come in when his wife was having cancer problems. You never knew he had a problem. He was always positive. And he was a delight to work for, too, from my standpoint. And I felt I accomplished a great deal with him. So those are the three guys I really worked for. I didn't have the opportunity to work with John Campbell when he came. He really did put the arm on me to stay in my vice presidency, but I had, early on, I need to tell you this story. I went to see Larry one time, and I said, Larry, I want to go back to my teaching. That was my dream. I've been in all these jobs. I've got to wrap my career up back in the classroom and doing what I want to do for the last 5 years if I can. And he said, Dick, I'm going to tell you something, and no one else is going to know it. I'm going to retire in 1 year, and I want you to stay in this job for me for 1 more year. It'll make an easier transition. And I said, well, Mr. President, yes, I will do that for you. But I said, I have one condition. The board must act on my change of position before we even know who the candidates are for the new presidency. Because I don't want anybody saying, well, Dick Poole didn't like the new president and he resigned, or the new president didn't like Dick Poole and kicked him out. So they took my appointment to go back to the classroom, or up to the classroom. I always felt that teaching's a higher deal, not the administration. So I went back to be promoted to teach professor. And they went to the board in October and sent them out the stuff. And then on the 1st of December, at the board's action, And there's big articles in the paper. He is elected to go back to teaching, so forth. And the regents were very kind and gave me the title Regents Distinguished Service Professor. They'd had Service Professor, but they hadn't had Regents Distinguished Service Professor. So I got that title, and the board was very kind to me, and I've always appreciated it. But when the new president came in and was selected, he wanted me to stay on. Well, I'd already committed, and I had an easy out. He talked to the local publisher and said, "Can you talk Dick into it?" He talked to Senator Shedrick. They said, he's got his mind made up. He's bought his new Jeep, and he's going to Colorado for 6 months.
Hooray for you, right?
Yeah. So anyways, those are the guys I work for. And John Campbell, I helped him on some things. We had a big program one time that Bob Sandmeyer worked for him on the role of us on economic development. And I came up with the idea of this big fair. We invited OU and everyone to put this in the library, all these displays. We had a statewide program, and I helped him with that. He wrote me a very nice letter about that. I did some other things on the side, but I didn't work for him. And then, of course, I didn't get to work with Jim Halligan, although Jim Halligan, when he retired, he and I shared office area together, and I became a good friend of Jim Halligan, and I found him to be an outstanding individual who I have the greatest admiration for, and we shared a lot of things together and had a good relationship. And of course, now he's been elected to the state senate. But the minute he's starting to run for office, he moved right out of his offices from the university and stepped out things because he didn't want to embarrass the university or have anyone accusing him of using state property for any kind of thing. So that's my story with the presidents. It's longer than you wanted, but the ones I had the honor to work with were great presidents.
Okay. Okay. Dick, just a couple quick questions. One, I want to come back to alumni relations in just a minute because you have such an understanding. Can you share a little bit your philosophy about the importance of alumni relations and why alumni association, strong, viable alumni association is so important to the university?
Oh, it's the glue that can hold everything together. And it's also the boiling pot that can give people a chance to get involved and build so much for the institution. There are so many people that want to be involved, and to involve them in a constructive way is so important. And you build these friends, you never know when they're going to be able to come in and help you, whether it's with legislators or whether it's with other people on raising funds or critical issues, certainly on recruiting. You've got to have a big net. You've got to have a big net. Plus, if you have that, as I've always said, you can go and say, I represent 25,000, whatever the figure is, people of the Alumni Association who are trying to advocate this important program. I mean, that's just one little place where you can pick it up and use it. The relationships there, it's like we've just been here to a funeral of Mel Jones. Mel was always in the thick of the alumni relations. What an OSU leader he was. And they become a part, not all, of the friend raising for the university. Raising more and more friends and speaking on behalf of the university. Canceling fictitious stories out at the cocktail parties and the dinner parties. Keep them informed. Make them proud. And they can do so much in little informal ways that create an image of the institution. That's what creates the image of the institution. You can't do too much. You've done such a good job of expanding that. And I again go back to its role in student recruitment. I go back to its role on fundraising, dealing with legislators, just promoting the general public image of our land-grant university.
Right on.
What would you add to that, Jerry?
You said it well. I just creating ambassadors and advocates for Oklahoma State University.
Absolutely.
And a lot of good things to do. Doesn't have anything to do with fundraising, but long term it affects it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What some kind of questions some of your colleagues you work with? We talked about presidents, not in any detail, but there's some vice presidents, other unit heads, colleagues that you worked with that you stand out in your mind that you remember?
My relationship with Jay Boggs was just phenomenal. He and I were both committed to the university. We coordinated well together. We didn't try to play any upsmanship one on the other. We were blunt with each other. I had certain strengths. Jay had them. I know a lot of times Jay would send me something and say, Dick, would you read over this? You kind of got to focus on some detail. Maybe sometimes I'm a detailed person. I can see the big picture. But I used to always say, I quoted that lady said, we don't seem to have time to do it right the first time, but we always have time to do it over. Well, I want to do it right the first time. And a lot of people will dictate out a memo that they don't proof, and it gets all kinds of resources moving in the wrong way because it had a mistake in it. But Jay would send me things to read over important documents and so forth. But more than that, on the big issues, we'd be together on policy issues. We'd meet with the president in what they call the executive group. We would raise questions with each other to try and be well prepared. Jay never tried to step in my territory. He would protect it. I would try to protect his. Yet we'd have give and take. And I think the flow there was great. Now, Ron Beer in Student Services was another great colleague. He really worked with those students. He had great rapport with them and did so many wonderful things. And Ed Davidson in his own right. We kidded Ed, but he had a big role there and just did so many things in the financial area for us. And so I had great relationship with those kinds of people. And of course, I love Merle Rogers. He early on, he was cut from a different mold. We all are cut from different molds. And the thing I admired about you, Jerry, even at your retirement, you had Mrs. Rogers there sitting at that table, Rogers. And Merle is a legend. And as far as I'm concerned, Jerry Gill's going to be a legend. He already is, but as we came and I was on that dang committee, Jerry Gill is the ultimate cowboy. Now that I was on the committee that got you help label with that, and that's doggone true. And I was honored to be on the planning committee for your retirement. But you can't stay retired. You're still out working for your university, buddy.
All right, back to you. Okay. Well, look, Dick, it may sound like a silly question, but looking back, anything you do differently in your career at Oklahoma State? I'm not talking about little things, just.
Oh, yes. There were times I lost my temper that I hated myself for it. A very wise man once told me, Dick, a good administrator never should lose their temper with a subordinate. It's okay to lose it with a superior, but not with a subordinate. And I have lost my temper at times with a subordinate. And a few times I've had the guts to go back and apologize. I think you can deal with people on tough issues, but you don't lose your cool. I sometimes would lose my cool, and I felt that's a weakness that I had. I wish I could have done things differently there. There are other times that I may have pushed certain programs a little too hard that I shouldn't have pushed. But in general, I tried to listen. And I think sometimes, now this sounds like a contradiction, I should have been more forceful. I bent over backwards a lot of times, it didn't show to a lot of people, in trying to create goodwill and didn't take people on that I probably should have stepped on a little harder. But if it came really tough, I would deal with that. But I guess those issues are the ones that, my own personality traits on that. And then I never felt that I had a giant intellect, and I always had great respect for those that did have a good intellect. And I wish I could have promoted some people even more than I did. But I tried to promote people following Mr. Webb's suggestion, help others, not only just in financial ways, but in making them successful. And that was a joy.
Dick, probably hard to pick out some special memories, but do you, looking back, are some things that stand out in your mind, your highlights in your career? And I'm not talking about accomplishments, just things that give you a lot of pride.
Oh, again, I'd go back. I think the way the College of Business overall has emerged in the state and under Bob's leadership continued to reach out to the business community and become highly respected. One of the things that we haven't really touched on was the Centennial Program. That was a highlight. Larry Boger said, look, in 10 years, he planned. This is planning. I'd like to have seen better. Oh, by the way, I think I failed on getting as much planning going. Not to hold you back, but I'd like to have seen more effective planning on focusing our resources. But Larry Boger said, we need to plan for our centennial starting 10 years in advance. And we did. And by doing that, we were able to come up with things like this. The Centennial History Series, 25 plus volumes that cover every college. Bob Comm was prevailed upon to take that on and head it. He did yeoman service. There's no university that has a record recorded like we have. I've always been a nut of history. I've always tried to support the history program. And I first displayed this when we were able to take your dissertation for your doctorate and publish it on the great adventures, is what I call it, in international education. And that led me to, I was visiting Stanford to see what they did on their centennial to come up with this idea of the centennial histories. I'm very proud of that. I'm just very, very proud of that Centennial Histories program. Those stand out. But of course, I guess I really, of all the things, enjoyed my time as Dean of the College of Business. We got curriculum changes through that were unbelievable. I got some recognition for the college. We got the Southern Economic Association, a prestigious group, to have their headquarters there. And I really enjoyed my national associations when I was there. Probably my best job that I ever had was when I was dean. And because I was close to students, I had this great association with the students that I'm so proud of. Still a little bit with my graduate students, not much there in the dean's role. And then nationally, I got involved. I don't know what happened, but even by my peers from University of Chicago and all, they elected me to the small board of the American Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business. And I was on there with the dean of the University of Chicago, who later became Undersecretary of State. Those associations, the associations I was exposed to throughout my life have just been unbelievable. The Jim Webbs, the Stanley Drapers, the Bob Comms and the Larry Bogers. Nationally, meeting Harry Truman, spending time with him, and stories. But that's enough. I've had a great ride. I've been blessed, and I don't mean that to sound corny, to have been able to serve Oklahoma State University.
Dick, what just events, are there some historical significant key events that you recall during your years that stand out to you? I mean, we had President visited, President Nixon's visit. I mean, maybe not just, but there are other events or things that you recall in your years.
I'll never forget President Nixon's visit because this was during a very difficult period in our history. He was close to going out of office and so forth. Bob Comm called the vice presidents down. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And he was sitting down at this end, one end of the room, the south end. I was sitting at the north end, there around where we'd sit around this coffee table. And he said, we've got the president coming. It's going to be a big deal because there's a lot of controversy. It's going to be tough, displays and all. And he got up and he walked around the table and he sat down on the arm of my chair and he said, Dick, and I want you to head this up. I just dropped on the floor. I said, what are you saying? Dick, I need you to head this up. Well, I had it. And I worked. I said, well, one thing we're going to do, this is going to be an academic exercise. I'm going to try to pull it off without any great problems. I worked hard. My office turned into a war room up there. We had all these people from the White House come in, all the planning. They were up there. And I kept saying, now, this is going to be an academic exercise. And I'm going to have a place for the protesters to demonstrate, and there'll be a place for the pros to demonstrate. We're going to keep them apart. We're not going to have uniformed policemen running all over the stadium. We'll have plain clothes. We're not going to have signs. If someone comes up and has a protesting, we just say, this is an academic exercise. Would you please honor? We're going to try to do that all across the board. I had local people say, I want to take the crane, hang it up so we can put a sign up, we're proud of you, Nixon, and show it for the stadium. I vetoed that. People got mad at me in town for that. I had all this pressure. Then when we decided on the platform party, I said it's going to be academic. The politicians out of Washington, D.C. said, well, now we want this politician up there, this politician, including Senator Bellman, Scott. I said, no. If they don't belong up there, they're not going up there. Well, we'll see. I even went to Henry Bellman and I said, Henry, I need your support on this. I want this to be an academic. I can make it work, I think, if you let me. Henry backed me. And the only people, I said, all the rest are going to sit up in the press box. And Henry led the charge to sit up there and the rest of them. It paid off. I had letters as I escorted Nixon and off. And I did say, I don't want any problems. We never had a hitch. The demonstration stayed. They honored the signs inside. People responded to that. There was none of that pro stuff or anti stuff in the stadium. As we walked off, the president turned to me and he said, well, I hope I didn't say anything that embarrassed you. I know what you've done, and you did the right thing, and I want to thank you. I may not have been a big supporter, but I tell you, when you're in the presence of the President of the United States, you're sitting, and I have a picture of him shaking hands with his wife and the Bellattis who helped me with all of this. And that's an event that just had to stand out in my mind. Difficult. And later on, the American Association of University Professors wrote a paper, and they said this was well handled. There was no prejudice on either side. And I just had all of those things. So I felt it was a success. Russ Conway helped me in that. Ralph Hamilton helped me in that. So many people. And it did work out. And God, it was tough. I'll never forget that. But it did work out. That one really stands out.
What does it feel like to be in the presence of the President of the United States?
For me, as an old country boy, I'm very humbled. I mean, I can talk big around a lot of people, but you get in the presence of someone like that who's such a strong personality and truly one of the most powerful people in the world in terms of representing this great nation. And it's humbling. But I got to tell you one other story, if I've got a minute. When I was looking after Mr. Webb's building in Washington, D.C., I don't know, I'm going to tell it anyway. Harry Truman, of course, who Jim Webb had worked for, would come by the building at the time. This after he was, of course, out of the presidency. He came by one day and we started visiting. Wonderful man. And I'd always been a Truman. I hadn't at first. I was for Dewey at first, and then I got to know Truman. If you read McCullough's book, you can't help but say, what a great American.
It's a great book.
So he came in and we started visiting, and he says, now you're from Oklahoma. I said, yes, sir. Boy, I was even kind of awed just being the president of a past president. I mean it back then. Well, he said, I'm going to tell you a story. Now, this is a guy from the mayor of Kansas City. Mind you, I wouldn't tell this, but I'm just telling you what the mayor said. He said, we had this football player. Now, he said, you're at Oklahoma State a minute. Yes. He said, not OU. I said, that's right. He said, well, I had this football. They had this football player up there, and he was great. And the college, the high school said, you got to go up to Notre Dame. You can do everything. You kick, run, punt. You're good defensive. Went to Notre Dame, worked out. They were just overwhelmed with him. The coach was walking off the field with him, had his arm around him. He says, oh, we're so proud. We're going to want you here. He said, now, by the way, you are a Catholic, aren't you? Well, he said, no, sir. Oh, well, he says, I'm going to call my friend down to SMU. And he said, you go down there. So he went down there and went through the same thing. Guys, terrific. Walking off the field, his arm around him. And he said, by the way, you're a Methodist, aren't you? No, sir. Oh, he said, I'm going to send you over to Baylor. He said, he'd like want to look at you. He went over there and visited. They're walking off the field. Well, this kid had all he could take. He just had been wiped out with this. They're walking off the field. And he said, now, you are a Baptist, aren't you? Well, he said, no, sir. He said, well, no, instead he said, just blurted out when he raised that question. He said, I'm an SOB, hearing that same question. And the guy said, oh, I'll call OU. They'll take you up there. Now, Truman told me that story, and then he started laughing. He said, now, mind you, I wouldn't tell that story. I'm just repeating what the mayor said. So to me, that showed the humor of this down-to-earth guy. And that's one of my cherished memories, that the ex-president of the United States told me that story.
Dick, another story you shared offline earlier. about the connection of Henry G. Bennett, president of Oklahoma State University, going to Point Four program, heading up our International Technical Assistance programs. Jim Webb had some tie in that. Can you share that story?
Well, Jim Webb was Undersecretary of State with Dean Acheson, and they identified, and Kerr thought that Henry would be the right guy to go. So Jim Webb was the one that made the initial contact. And in one of these books, you have a picture of Jim Webb leaning over, talking to him there. And he was the one, I think, that called Henry G. Bennett at first, or one of his assistants then got on the line and got Henry Bennett to head up the Point Four program. Now, one of the assistants of Jim Webb told me later, he came down with him to be vice president at Republic Supply Company. Jim came down as president. He said, we had guys going to Congress testify about this program from Yale and Harvard. And he said, some of those congressmen didn't like those snooty guys. He put it that way. He said, we got Henry Bennett up here and got him over to testify. And he said he was such a gem. Henry had a degree from Columbia University, but he had that drawl. And he said the senators had raised kind of a question about opposing something and why something. And they said, Henry'd say, yes, Senator. He'd be, yes, Senator, I understand. Now, I understand but have you ever thought about this side and talk? He said pretty soon he had those congressmen eating out of the palm of his hand, and the Point Four program sailed. And they all felt that when Henry got killed in that plane crash over in Iran, that was a great loss. And as you know from the book you wrote, what the national commentator said about him, a great man. But so he had his ties back to the Truman administration, Dean Acheson and Jim Webb, of course. And then Webb came here and became very close friends with his sons, all of his sons. And it was just a great tie there.
Dick, what do you think people, or let me rephrase it, what do you hope people say about Dick Poole? And I think back on the nearly 30 plus years at Oklahoma State University.
Boy, that's a hard question. I guess all of us have a little bit of an ego or something, but I wish they could say, Dick really was interested in young people and their education. He did want to create an environment in which the faculty could perform admirably, and he was motivated, even though he may not have always done it, doing the right thing. He was motivated to do the right thing for his alma mater, Oklahoma State University, that he wanted to do the right thing. And I hope they'll say in most cases he did do the right thing. And a lot of times there'll be things they won't know that it did, and that's just a part of life. But I hope they'd say, well, he gave it his best shot. And I feel like it's certainly given me the best ride I could ever hope to have.
Let me final question, maybe back on OSU that you love so much. How are you feeling about Oklahoma State University and its future? You mentioned earlier you feel very positive about the leadership under Burns Hargis. Other things in terms of our growth. Are you encouraged about where we're going?
Yes, and I think the commitment there, I got to say a word about through the School of International Studies, where even the current executive vice president, provost, we've gotten to the stage where we say we want our students to learn how to operate in the world's economy, and that the long run objective is for all of our students someday to have experience and exchanges overseas so that we can deal. We live in a world economy. A lot of people don't want to face up to that, but even today's economic problems illustrate this, that we're not an enclosed society anymore. We can't survive that way. And so I see a bright future for OSU playing a leadership role in helping this country continue to grow. And I used to have a speech on this, and become a self-renewing society. We have enough knowledge to become a self-renewing society. History tells you that every society rises and declines. We know enough about the causes, and this is a whole nother topic. We know enough about the history of the rise and decline of nations to avoid decaying. We can become a self-renewing society. The big question is, can we use the knowledge that we have? implementation is so difficult. Having good ideas, having knowledge, yes, but how do you implement it? And that's the big thing. I see a great future for OSU, playing a leadership role here, educating young men and women to be on the world stage and be effective at it. So I believe in the continuation of the land grant mission, just expanded to a world stage.
Anything we left out? Anything? We've covered a lot of stuff here.
I didn't mean to ramble so much, but I'm just so proud of you, Jerry. I feel that I talked about. I take a lot of pride in my students. I take pride in what all you have done for our alma mater.
Yeah. Feelings mutual. You're one of my mentors. Thank you.